and you can start when you're ready. Thanks.
All right. So I did a little bit of a talk on some of the projects that I've done a few months ago now. So I was just going to go and go back to one of my first projects and just do a little bit of a deeper dive into that. Maybe some of my other projects, some future date. But this was a blog that I created many years ago, 1993. It's very small at the time. It's about 100 pictures. Just did an HTML, and the front page came out, and I migrated onto that, and stayed on that for about 18 years. Last front page was released in 2003, and there were no plans for further versions of it at the end of life soon after. So the problem that I started having was that it wouldn't run on Windows 10. Web hosting companies were complaining about the size of the site. There were a lot of files on it, and it was about 130 gigs in size. That's including thumbnails and videos and all that kind of thing. So I had a look at what was available. The decision I made at the time, mid-2015, was to move to WordPress. So I first hosted it with a company called IX Web Hosting. I think their support team was in Kiev. But as with everything, they pull you in on a cheap price, and the price keeps going up. And then they started complaining about actual my space that I used on their servers, even though it's it's the usual thing, it's unlimited space. But when you actually try and add a reasonable amount, they started complaining. So what I did was I moved the photos to Flickr and with the videos on YouTube, and that reduced down the actual footprint that sat on their server, and they were reasonably happy again. But there was still the other problem that they had with the site was more and more people were actually hitting the site. So they were saying that I needed to convert my my license to a commercial license. And that obviously wasn't going to work for me. It was just a private for fun site. So I did some digging around, and then I bought my first Raspberry Pi, installed Apache, PHP, WordPress, etc., and then migrated it from IX Web Hosting to hosting it from home, which we'll cover here. And so I've been running it now for 3-4 years now, sitting on a Raspberry Pi 4 now. And it's it's pretty much up most of the time. It's very seldom have any downtime with it. So just very quickly, this is my home network, somewhat simplified. It's got a few more bits and bobs on it, but the 2 bits we'll go through here. So I've got a Virgin router. This is the one that comes in off the street, obviously my fiber. Then I go through a router here. So I've got port forwarding here. This over here is just a Cat6 cable that goes into the WAN port of my internal router with no port forwarding, and then that goes to an unmanaged switch that then goes down to this Raspberry Pi 4. I've upgraded to a 4 now, which is one of the machines we'll look at now. And then the other one here with the port forwarding, it goes through this switch over here, and then through port 80 to another Raspberry Pi. That's a 4 now as well. And that's 192.168.0.150. So everything below this line is effectively, the IP range is 192.168.1.x, and everything up above the line is .0.x. The view here is no port forwarding. In theory, if somebody hacks me, any of this stuff over here, we mentioned it on one of the previous talks, I've got all my Raspberry Pis here pretty much, I've got mostly set up to be built from Ansible, so it's very quick to rebuild it. Everything below this line, including my NAS and all that kind of thing, I really don't want people hacking into that. So NAS of course gets turned off when we're not using it, but generally you're far less likely for them to get through 2 firewalls. So yep, the production server up there, and then the development server at the bottom. So the development server is effectively my golden copy of everything. If somebody blows away the production one, it actually doesn't matter too much. Now just very quickly, the DNS. So the one thing when you set it up to run anything from home, be it WordPress or any other website, you need to, many of you be familiar with this, I imagine, but if you just type what is my IP address, it'll give you your public IP address. You then need to use a name server so that it then routes, if anybody hits that IP address with port 80, for instance, it then knows where that goes. So again, I'm a virgin. They haven't changed my IP address. Well, they hadn't up until 3 months ago when I upgraded it to a 350 meg line. Then the IP address changed, but generally it doesn't change at all. So there's a company called Dinu, which I use. I imagine there are others, but it's a free DNS service for up to 3 domain names. So they're the 3 domain names that I've got. And you can see there, this is what I typed in last night. So 82.14.33.19, that one at the top there. And then that then forwards on to my IP address. So brianhennon.com goes to, hits that IP address. So on the next page, I then got the next, but it's important, is of course port forwarding. So I bind my IP address off this dhcp-cd.conf. You can of course, I used on my old Virgin router, you were able to do it on MAC address to IP address. The new one, which they had to send me when I got my line upgraded, it's far more finicky and often doesn't save it down. There are lots of entries on the forums, people complaining about that. So I found it a lot easier to do it just with a config file. And the other thing is there are 4 of us in the house, and each time you change the MAC address to IP binding, you find 3 people you never knew in the house suddenly appear asking what's happened to the internet. So by actually putting it onto the Raspberry Pi into this file, of course, you can reboot it, and then it picks up its IP address on the next reboot. So that's the IP address that I showed you earlier. It's just 192.168.0.150, and the port forwarding. So when it comes in from that Dinu service to 192 port 80 goes to 192.168.0.150, which will mean it then hits the Raspberry Pi 4 that is sitting on my desk. So just very quickly, what I've had 2 ways that I've kind of served it up. Unfortunately, the first way is broken, so I've had to move on to something new, and I'm sort of still assessing what my sort of much longer term strategy is going to be. So the old way that I had it was using Flickr, which was really, really handy. It was, as you know, it's effectively cloud-based. So when I needed to put something on the website, I downloaded the pictures from my phone to the NAS, and the NAS was configured to automatically upload to Flickr using the uploader. Then in WordPress, you just had to create the hooks into Flickr for each photo set, which is effectively a directory. Add the commentary, build a package on the dev server, FTP the package to the prod server, clear down the prod server, then install the package. So that was pretty quick, but of course everything sat on Flickr. So initially Flickr was free with their uploader, then they started charging for it, and then unfortunately the PHP add-in to create the hooks was then created with Perl version, I'm trying to remember now, I think it was 5.6, and the version that you now get on Buster is 7.3, and even 7.0 wouldn't work with it. So without having to do some real finicky configuration with trying to roll back Perl, PHP rather, to 5.x, I had to take the decision to move on to something new. So I moved to something called NextGen, which I'll show you in a second. So the process there is download the pictures to the NAS, as I did before. But what I do now is I rsync from the NAS. I've routed my NAS drive to the hard drive attached to the web dev server, and I rsync to the WordPress area. The advantage this gives me is an extra 2 backups. Create the album, mend the album path. I have to scan for new photos, and then I do similar to what I've done on the other side here. Then create a package, copy it over to the production server. So it's a little bit more painful. Does work, as we'll see, but yeah, I'm looking maybe in the longer term of some other solution. So next step, as I said, move back to Flickr style CMS. The one advantage that with the Flickr style CMS was it's a content management system, is when people hit my website, they of course got the the content that got served up from my home network was effectively just the glue between Flickr and the actual content that was served up from home was just the text on the web pages. So very low bandwidth from my home network, and of course Flickr is distributed via multi-sites. So that actually worked really well. So it works fine as it is now, but I would quite like to move back to something like I had with Flickr, but of course I don't want to spend a fortune on it. So moving to AWS, that kind of thing, is not cost effective, certainly not in the longer term. And the other thing I've started looking at is moving to something that's Python based. So there's packages such as Mezzanine and others. So I'm going to look at how that evolves over time, just to see whether it's something that I might move on to at some future date, but definitely no rush on that. Right, so just quickly on the actual, for those of you that haven't seen the GUI, I'm just moving these few things around. So this is, you'll see there at the top left, this is 192.168.1.150. So that's the website on my dev server. So again, that's on my private side network. So on both of these instances, you have the effectively that's what you would see. So that's just what you'd see on port 80. And then you have a dashboard. So on the dashboard, for those that you have not seen WordPress before, it's got a whole stack of stuff like plugins. You can figure up the what add-ins you want. So duplicator. That's how I build a package, effectively a zip file, and then copy it over to production and then unpack it. Next gen is the photo gallery, PDF, obviously embedding PDFs, and there's this Xemit anti-spam. Don't really use it, but and then you have these galleries. So it's a whole series. You can see there. It's a gallery effectively by day, and that's what you can see then the number of images in each of those days. And this is the production page. So if you see here, brianandhelen.com, any of you can go onto that right now, and you'll go through. If you type that in, of course, it's going to Dinu, which is getting forwarded to my public IP address, going through the Virgin router with the rule port 80 is going on to 192.168.0.150. And that's as you see it here. So for instance, over here, I think it's the same page. Yeah, New Zealand. So this is a trip we did months ago. So for instance, over here, this is just videos. We could say, yeah, Arnsbury Point. Let's say, just stick it on there. So if we update that, that then gets saved into a, the text gets saved into a MariaDB database. And then when you serve this up again, hopefully we'll see an extra line. There we go, Raspberry Pint. So as you can see, it's very easy to edit and change whatever needs to be changed. If I go to actual pages, all pages, yeah, my partner and I, we've been doing quite a lot of traveling, about 150 countries each. So it's a good way of basically grouping all. So holidays, you can go through here and see, scan through each year, and then each year then has a page, and then each page then has the pictures from that trip. Yeah, so some of these, a lot of these are still sitting with, see this over here is the old PHP, the one that I was telling you about earlier. This is this thing over here, which is awesome Flickr plugin. And again, I created this page about 3 years ago, last updated 3 years ago. And unfortunately, when I started working on it, the guy decided he wasn't updating it anymore. So this is now not being distributed anymore. So I need to, this is why I've moved on to the next gen. So the PHP library that I use now is Yeah, so it works for the YouTube, for instance, and for the PDF embedder, but not for actual photos. So if I go to one of the more recent pages, so sailing at the beginning of the year, of course, that's working. This is now using, it's using NextGen. So it's then, and then when you click on this, it's then, the way that it actually accesses the files, so if I go to web prod, the actual media, so this is the directory structure on my web prod. So this is the 192.168.0.150. So off WP content. Now the one thing I had to do was NextGen and other similar add-ins. They have a directory actually off the main web path to like gallery, for instance. But my problem was when you build a package, it then sucks everything in from the gallery directory. So what I did was I created a symlink to mount USB to effectively a USB drive that is attached to it. So when I build the package, I actually delete the symlink, build a package, and then recreate the symlink. Otherwise, the package, you can imagine, with 130 gigs of photos and et cetera, it would just, the actual package size would be just bonkers in size. Yeah, I think that's about it, really. I've got, as again, these are all the videos. You saw the other one of Thailand that had the PDF. So it's actually a very good way of grouping all my photos. What I do as well, which might be a future session, is I have on the actual. Hold on. Yeah, so port forwarding. I also have port forwarding for 1194, which is VPN. So I use OpenVPN, so I can actually VPN to the, I can VPN onto this machine over here, which is my public side web server, which has a symlink to all my photos and media. So I can actually browse through all my photos from my iPhone or iPad or whatever, just via VPN. And of course, when I'm connect via VPN, I can see everything on this side of the network, including the USB drive that's attached to the production WordPress site. But yeah, it's been working well. Again, that's just the next thing that I'll be looking at maybe is I'm doing some NeoPixel Python stuff at the moment, but eventually I do want to go back to this the whole WordPress implementation and just see if there's a better way of doing it. But that's going to be a project for the next couple of months' time, probably. Any questions? Can you hear me?
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, sir, I had a question. So you said you had about 98% uptime. What was the downtime? What happened?
Well, I think a couple of years ago, I just could not figure out why it wouldn't come up. And I think it was, I mean, the one thing that I think all of us on this call would agree is it's better to spend a little bit more on reasonable SD cards. And I bought some, I can't remember what they were, but they were quite cheap Chinese SD cards. And I think they were just blowing, I think. And the other thing that I think has been good, I mean, if you look at if I top the server, you can see it's got, 2 gigs. Okay, I turned this on only an hour ago, but it's, it's using no swap at all. Another Pi that blew an SD card was, it was also running far too hot. So, the one thing I find is I try and make sure that it doesn't swap too much to the SD card, because I think that was the reason that it went down. But for the last, touch wood, for the last couple of years, it's been up all the time. It's not, it's been absolutely fine. So I think the trick really is to spend a bit more on SD cards and rather get a Pi with 4 gigs rather than, well, it used to be on a Pi with 1 gig, and I used to run a whole lot of other Python stuff and all sorts of bits and bobs, but I've kind of cut that back on the web server now.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are finding better reliability with SSDs on USB boot, but I don't know. I haven't done that myself. Is anyone online? Want to speak to that?
Yeah, I've done lots of stuff USB, just standard USB thumb drives on the Pi. No problem at all at the moment.
Yeah, actually, I use on my CCTV. I've got a thumb drive mounted on in the roof, and that's been going absolutely fine for a few years. But then I had another SAN disk which blew about 3 months after I put it in, so it's been a bit hit and miss for me.
They're not the fastest in the world at delivering files, but there's been some stuff I've been recently looking at online by a guy called Jeff Gerling. He does a load of Ansible stuff. He did a review of the fastest USB drives. There's some special code. I can't remember what he said, but I mean, I might have to see what performance I'm getting off those as well. But they're safe now. You get such a lot of data on such a like a huge disk drive, you know, on a thumb drive.
I'm sort of undecided, for instance, for my CCTV Raspberry Pi I got in the roof, I'm sort of undecided whether it's better to get a bigger SD card or have just a normal one with a thumb drive. I'm not sure where you get the better throughput.
For most thumb drives and SD cards, you'll get much better write throughput if you've got at least 32K sector sizes or cluster sizes. Or because the problem is often you have to effectively read the whole cluster, patch it and write it back if you've got smaller cluster sizes than that.
But on this website side, I've been absolutely fine on the performance. It's
read performance is fine. It's more
yes, and for this, it's I think the only writes you'd be doing is on the MariaDB database, which is going to be very small if people add comments or whatever.
The only one that I really found was if you have your site and the site and the actual data coming off the site from the micro SD, that is you get a serious hit on that. But from the USB, you get great speeds, even with the crappy USB thumb drive.
Okay.
And as you've got USB booting now, you can take the SD card completely out of the equation.
Yeah. So but is a USB, for instance, if you have swap on the USB, is it as quick as an SD card?
Don't put swap on
similar
device. Don't. It's 2020. You don't need swap. If you're running out of memory, you've got other issues. Swap will degrade any card, and it degrades a hard drive at the end of the day.
The other thing that I've found is you do need to, I mean, depending on whether you're using Apache or Nginx, you do need to make some tweaks to a Pi 4 to get the best out of that, to sort of, that's what your memory and stuff is doing.
Yeah, one gig was a little bit tight, I found, but at 2 gigs, it's been absolutely fine.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, key difference between SSDs is typically you'll have multiple engines doing your writes. So effectively you can have more than one NAND flash sector open concurrently, and they'll be able to queue more writes as well. Whereas the cheap USB sticks and SD cards especially, you've literally only got one write engine, and that if you've got multiple concurrent writes going on, they'll really hammer it.
Yeah, it's fantastic, but it's still quite prohibitive. I mean, didn't you say you had like 100 gig of data? That's going to start becoming on the on your super fast your PCIe SSD or whatever.
Yeah, at the moment I've just got a slow, just external USB 2 drive, which serves up that media, which seems to actually be okay. I do restart it once a day, but it seems to be fine.
And if you have a crazy good performance, we're now seeing the first casings for Pi 4s which have space for an M2 SSD.
Yeah, but that still connects via USB, doesn't it?
Still connects via USB, but it does mean that it is a little more performant because it streams better onto the USB interface. I have a bunch of SSDs running on the Pis here, and the ones that run best are the ones which actually have M2 cards on them, because the controllers are basically much more tuned up to drive them at max speed.
And do you boot off that?
Yes.
Do you boot? You do? Oh, okay.
Yeah. I think I've done all my Pis, all the Pi 4s here now boot off an SSD.
And what about, because you can boot off the net, you can boot off Ethernet as well, can't you? So is it not?
Yeah, but that means you can lose all your device booting if you lose the booting server. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of fiddling to do around that. You have to get MAC addresses to select their boot image and set the right one, and it leaves you with usually with a TFTP server sitting on your network.
Yeah.
Ideally, you never want.
Okay.
How do you find a good, reliable M2 SSD?
Experience. I mean, if you do the standard model of, if it's really cheap, the chances are it's not brilliant. If it's really expensive, the chances are it's too performant for you. I've been picking up 512 gig SSDs that are around about 70 quid, and they seem to be pretty reliable, though they're only going in external enclosures at the moment till the nice new cases arrive.
And can you recommend a starting level and source?
Sabrent. Well, the Sabrent brand seems to have been done fairly nicely. They can run a little hot, so if you've got a heatsink to hand, put that on. But yeah, Sabrent, not the Rocket series because that's just very spendy. But the basic Sabrent stuff seems to be fine and a good price.
Thank you.
Does your Pi run hot running in this website? Out of interest.
No, not really.
I mean, how much is it hit anyway?
Yeah.
Well, my ISP was complaining a lot. I mean, I don't think it's that hot, to be frank. But when it was at one stage, it got really hot. But I don't know if I was to be quite frank, I don't know if it was people I was trying to get hacked by. But yeah, I don't think it's not that hot. I don't think. But it is. I don't have well, not at the moment anyway. I don't have password protection or anything. So you do, I guess, get the Google web crawlers and stuff hitting it. But yeah, I don't think it's.
It's a shame about Virgin, really. Virgin, I think I used to be on Virgin, and I'm sure they used to do a fixed IP address.
But as I say, I've been with Virgin for 5 years, and they've changed my IP address once, which was 3 months ago when I changed to a different download speed. So I changed from my 100 meg to a 350 meg download contract. So, but for the 3 years before that, it was the same IP address. So it's as good as fixed.
Yeah, they are moving to try to get as many of their customers off fixed IP addresses and upsell them on a fixed IP address for extra money.
But you can actually you can configure it so that it actually follows the changed IP address, as long as you don't mind a little bit of downtime.
Well, you don't even get much downtime with that because it's basically dynamic DNS Service is sending up. When you get a reset on the line, you just send up your new IP address to a remote server, and it pushes that into DNS.
Yeah.
If your time to live is not set for small centuries, then you should be up fairly quickly.
Yeah.
Well, any other questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a similar setup. I quite like the splitting the network. So a couple of interesting points. I run an Nginx proxy in front of everything because I kind of ran out of. I couldn't shove everything on port 80 and 443, so that's what I was doing. And then I didn't like SD cards, so I've mounted everything across the network. I was a bit worried about the speed, but it doesn't seem to be a problem.
How have you used that, with the NFS or?
SSH.
Okay. But how, what is that, the actual media that you serve up on the website?
Yeah, I've got a RAID server, and then anytime I want to serve it, I mount across on SSH, and then whatever's using it is just mounted. So if the SD card fails, for instance, I don't really problem because nothing's important stored on the SD card. It's just rough setup and
although the Raspberry Pi will go down if your SD card fails, I guess.
Yeah. But
yeah,
it's cheap. I found it a cheaper way to store like the photos, because photos just get out of hand, especially with the amount of pixels you get these days.
Yeah, as I say, I have done an rsync from my NAS to the Raspberry Pi, and then a dev server. Then I rsync that as well to the prod server. So it gives me the advantage of having multiple copies. But
yeah.
I haven't. Yeah, I mean, it's not like my data changes that quickly that I need to have it looking at just one golden copy. It changes when I come back from holidays, and then I'll sync it across. But yeah, it depends. I guess it depends how quickly you're needing to update it, etc.
Yeah, well, it points to the golden copy, and that's updated. That's backed up separately.
Yeah, you see, I can't. The only thing is, I can't do that because my prod server is the other side of my firewall. So my NAS is on my NAS is on my private side.
I quite like how you set that up. Actually, I might.
Yeah, it just gives me the comfort of knowing it's extremely unlikely somebody will get through. And they do say you should have 2 different makes of firewall as well, so the chances are lower that they'll get through both. But yeah, so I can't actually mount it that way, which is why I can push it from my dev side back through the firewall, but not the other way. Nothing can go the other way. And that same thing goes across like many areas where I can, you know, if I've got my automation with home IO, all that kind of stuff, I can go one way through the firewall, not the other way. So you have to think about the direction you're going with all these kind of implementations, because you don't, in the whole thing, my principle is I don't want any port forwarding on the inside firewall.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Brian.
No problem.
So Andy, you have a few words you want to say, didn't you?
Sorry, I didn't catch what you said, Brian, Richard, but quick question for Brian. Your LAN plan has been receiving some love. Is there a way we can get a longer look at it?
Yeah. Can you see it? Is this what you wanted to see again?
Absolutely. The problem is I'm borrowing a Windows laptop for Zoom to work, and I'm not familiar with how you get a screenshot in that. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean the main thing here. So I showed you the. So sorry, I'm just going to go here very quickly. So this is the port forwarding. So this is actually a snapshot of the port forwarding on my Virgin router.
I was just wondering if you had it online at all.
I don't actually. I don't know if I could send it to Richard, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be great. I don't know if you're part of our Facebook group. I don't think so.
Yeah. So the important thing is that line over there is where I have no port forwarding. It's the only port forwarding. And I might add other forwarding here at some future date. I don't know, but the principle always is that it's so if I need to push like my media, for instance, I can only push it in that direction, not down, for instance. So I couldn't. There's no point having a NAS here because I wouldn't be able to see it. This confused the hell out of me when I first set this up, by the way, because I was connecting to the Wi-Fi on this side, but then I couldn't see, for instance, my Sonos that was on this side. So it was figuring out. It was just when I was trying to figure out firewalls and port forwarding and all that sort of thing. So it's the things like your Philips Hue controller, all that sort of thing needs to be all on. You put it all on this side. You could actually, I guess, put it on that side, but then you would be. It's the idea is having everything on this side, and then all the connections, phones, all that sort of thing connect on this side.
It's Nick. I've got a question around the port forwarding. Is it forwarding all? I'm not sure I've seen that approach. Is it the same as a reverse proxy, or does all traffic on port 80 get forwarded to the one device?
I think it's all traffic on port 80 goes to that single IP address, but I stand corrected.
Sounds right. It's just going through. That's about right to me.
Because I noticed you've got many devices on there and the cameras and things like that, but I guess you're not accessing those externally.
Not usually. No, well, pretty much not. But just remember, I can go in via port 1194, and then I can see all the IP addresses anyway. So once I go in via the VPN server, it's then this whole public side is then visible as local IP addresses.
Sure. So
from your phone or from your whatever, you can see them directly. But you can't. But I can't see anything on my private side. That's by design. That's what I wanted. But as soon as port 80 can only go straight to there, but port 1194 then opens up everything here, everything on the public side. So I can connect via VPN, and then I can go into on my iPhone. I can go into into Safari, and I can enter the IP address of the IP camera, let's say, and or anything, any of the IP addresses.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we need to win that call
I got head off for the night.
in that discussion there.
Good to see you all, guys.
Thanks very much, Brian. It's very good.
Sure.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you.